Welcome to the Justia Legal Guides video channel. Today, we will talk about personal injury law. When someone gets injured, they need to heal physically and emotionally. Serious injuries are stressful, and the stress can be made worse by mounting medical bills, lost wages, and the pain that the victim is suffering. A victim might be able to get compensation for these things and more if someone else caused their injuries. Personal injury law provides a way to do this. In a personal injury lawsuit, an injured person, the plaintiff, seeks to hold another person or entity, the defendant, legally responsible for their injuries. Personal injury law includes matters such as car accidents, slip and falls, medical malpractice, dangerous or defective products, and other accidents or wrongdoings. Most of these cases involve showing that a defendant was negligent. We'll talk first about what that means. We'll explain how a negligence claim might play out in a typical case. Then, we'll describe a different way to get compensation in some cases. Finally, we'll talk about the timing of bringing a personal injury claim. To show negligence, a plaintiff needs to prove 4 things. The defendant had a duty of care. The defendant breached that duty. The breach caused the plaintiff's injuries. And the plaintiff was damaged or harmed in some way. In other words, a negligent claim says that the plaintiff got hurt because the defendant didn't take the precautions that they should have. What precautions does someone need to take? This can depend a little bit on the situation, but generally, everyone has at least a duty to use reasonable care to avoid a risk of foreseeable injuries to others. Now, let's take a look at how the 4 elements of negligence might fit into a slip and fall case. Let's say there's a puddle of spilled olive oil on the floor of a grocery store. The store has a duty to address the puddle because it is foreseeable that a customer could slip and injure themselves. If the store doesn't put out a wet floor sign or clean up the puddle, this is likely a breach. If a customer slips in the puddle sometime later, this accident was caused by the breach. If the customer broke their arm, they've probably incurred damages for which they can get compensation. These might include their emergency room bill and lost wages from time out of work. But damages don't just cover financial costs. They can cover intangible emotional harm, like pain and suffering. That example looks pretty straightforward, but some cases aren't. Maybe the puddle was an obvious hazard that the customer should have noticed and taken greater care to avoid. Or maybe the olive oil had just been spilled, so a grocery store employee couldn't have cleaned it up that fast. The grocery store might be able to defeat the case on this basis. Or they might at least be able to show that the plaintiff was partly at fault. This usually would reduce the compensation that the store needs to pay. It's important to keep in mind that the plaintiff has the job of proving each element of the case. Fortunately for them, the standard of proof in a personal injury case is not very high. It's called the preponderance of the evidence. In other words, the plaintiff needs to prove that each element is more likely than not to be true. You can think of this as a 51% rule. That's what a negligence claim looks like. There's another way to get compensation in certain types of cases. This is called strict liability. States often provide for strict liability in cases involving defective products. These could be cars, household appliances, work equipment, medications, or anything else that hits the market with a defect. People who get injured by a defective product can sue the manufacturer or anyone else in the chain of distribution. If their state allows for strict liability in these cases, They don't need to show that the defendant was careless. They just need to show that there was a defect and it caused their injuries. The 51% or preponderance of the evidence rule still applies. The bottom line is that strict liability makes a plaintiff's job easier. If it's available for your type of case, it usually makes sense to take that route. We've talked about what you need to do to get compensation for your injuries. Now, let's talk about when you need to do it. Filing a case after an accident can seem like a headache on top of everything else that's going on in your life. Still, you can't wait too long to get the process started. There's a deadline to file a personal injury lawsuit called a statute of limitations. Different states have different statutes of limitations. To make things even trickier, some states have different statutes of limitations for different types of personal injury cases. However, you usually have between 1 and 6 years to file your case. Separate rules may apply if the injury wasn't obvious at first. Statutes of limitations are often written in confusing ways. If you're not sure which deadline applies to your case, ask a lawyer about it right away. Why is this so important? If a plaintiff files a personal injury lawsuit after the statute of limitations has run out, the defendant can probably get the case thrown out. This is true regardless of how strong the case is and how seriously the plaintiff was injured. It may be clear that the defendant caused the accident and the plaintiff has piled up millions of dollars in damages. The defendant won't need to pay a dime if the statute of limitations has run out. Even if this weren't an issue though, you should get started on your case as soon as possible. This will help you preserve the evidence that you need to get compensation. For example, in the slip and fall case that we discussed earlier, the plaintiff might want to use surveillance footage that shows when the spill happened, where it was, and when they fell. The footage might be overwritten if they don't act quickly. Thanks for watching this overview of issues in personal injury law. If you'd like to learn more, check out the Justia Legal Guide on this topic. You can also ask specific questions about personal injury law on our Justia Ask a Lawyer forum. Or if you need a lawyer, you can use the Justia Lawyer Directory to find a personal injury attorney in your area. We wish you the best of luck in resolving any legal issues that you encounter. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more Justia Legal Guides and law practice videos. See you in our next video.